There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am doing a Thursday night reads, which you'll see on Friday, Tokyo time, because I'm very busy tomorrow morning. So here I am, Thursday night. It's not going to be a tipsy one because I've just had literally only one sip and now two of my Thursday night bottle of wine. But let's get started. I've had a really good reading week, actually. No bails. Is that a good week or a bad week? I guess it's good. And I've finished two books. The first one that I finished was the anthology of short stories that I was doing as a buddy read with Heidi of My Reading Life. Everyday People, The Color of Life, a short story anthology edited by Jennifer Baker. And it was a real mixed bag for me, so I gave it 3 stars. That kind of accurately reflects, well, I guess I didn't do a mathematical averaging out my ratings for each story, but that's probably what it would have averaged out to. There was some stinkers, there was couple genre fiction short stories, sci-fi or something, and there were also some gems. So the two that I remember well enough to at least just mention in passing was Alexander Chi's short story. I thought was really good, not perfect, but it was really good, and I had never read anything by him. And I had heard enough kind of fair to Midland reviews of his stuff, especially his novel about the opera singer, that I didn't think I would ever bother trying anything by him, Alexander Chi, Korean-American novelist, and I am reconsidering that. I don't remember what the story was called in this anthology, but it was quite good, and it was about a gay Korean-American guy and remembering his high school days and looking up an old quote-unquote girlfriend and everything that happens from that, and a really nice portrait of his mother. The Korean-American mother was a really vivid character in that. And the other one that I liked, I think, a bit better than Heidi, but I loved it and she really liked it, thought the ending was lacking, was by a Canadian writer that I had never heard of. Her name is Carly Baker, and she is a Métis writer, I believe from British Columbia, and she's only had one short story collection published so far. I loved the story Moosehide in this anthology, and it was about, I don't know how autobiographical it was, but it was about two Métis Canadians. Métis, basically, if you're not Canadian, I'll just say it's mixed race, where you have at least some indigenous heritage and something else. Historically, it was French. Two Métis Canadians are joining a trek. It's a really expensive tour up to the North Pole or something with a bunch of white people. They're all young married couples, and they're finding the trip really physically arduous. Oh, breaking news. Louise Gluck, American poet, has won the Nobel Prize. I know the name, and that's absolutely everything I know about Louise Gluck. I'm sure we'll all know a lot more about Louise Gluck by the time this video goes live, but congratulations, it went to a woman. It went to a poet. First time in a while, hey? Not since that other amazing American poet, Bob Dylan. So they're on this expensive expedition, and they're really bone tired, and it's so physical, and it's so cold, and they're so tired that they're not really making friends with the other people, and they're just wondering, what the hell are we doing? And so it's a really interesting way to explore indigenous identity, Métis identity, in a really comic way. I loved it. There was a lot of forgettable stories as well, so 3-star read. It was a fun buddy read, checking in once a week with Heidi. Thanks, Heidi. And just today on the exercise bike, I finished Janet Frame's 1963 novel, not published until after her death, published in 2007, Towards Another Summer. Uncharacteristically for me, I was ready to film my review within hours of finishing it, so I have filmed it. You probably won't see it for a month, because that's how backlogged I am with videos in the Sean the Book Maniac video pipeline. But you will see the review eventually. The short version is, I really liked it. There were things I loved about it. It was a 4-star read. And there were things that I disliked enough that I did knock a star off. But it's really beautifully written, and I have a bunch of Sunday sentences from it. I want to read a lot more by Janet Frame. Any recommendations out there? So that's what I finished. And I have started 2 books. I've started this gay novel, Swimming in the Dark, by Tomasz Jedrzejewski, a Polish-American writer. I think he was Oh, his bio is fascinating. Jodorowsky was born in West Germany to Polish parents, studied at Cambridge and the Université de Paris, currently lives in France. I thought that maybe he lived in America too. But anyway, written in English, set in Poland. A gay coming out story, that's how I would describe it, only having read 40 pages so far. But I have to say, this is again, you heard me say similar things about Akwaeke Emeze's second novel. I was all superlatives galore as the novel opened, and by the end I pretty much hated it. But my initial assessment of this is, I would say, even more enthusiastic. It is so obviously a debut novel, and there is so much talent here. I don't know how I'm going to feel about the novel overall. It's early days, but it just oozes literary talent, and I am so emotionally hooked. It's not only that I'm visualizing the main character looking something like this, although that does help. It's so emotional, and I'm connecting with the coming out story so deeply. It's going to be one of those reads for me, at least that's how it's starting out. And the writing is not flashy, it's very pedestrian, can I say? It's very workmanlike, but every once in a while there is a turn of phrase that just grabs me by the collar, as they used to say. And my Sunday sentence was one of them last weekend. And if you disagree with me, you may think I'm silly, and I don't care, I'm used to that. But I think it's one of the most beautiful sentences I've ever read. And there's no other sentence in my reading of the first 40 pages that comes close to it. But that one sentence, it just turns me inside out at the literary beauty of it. So it is: it was the sort of early summer that erases any memory of other seasons. One where light and warmth clasp and feed you to the absolute. And the first half of the sentence is pretty forgettable, but then to build to that, where light and warmth clasp and feed you to the absolute, that just splits me right open. I think it's just freaking gorgeous. So I'm really into this novel. This is a buddy read with Ollie. We haven't checked in yet. We're going to check in on the first 75 pages on Sunday, I think. And I'm just really enjoying dipping into it every day or so. More later on Swimming in the Dark. And I have started Felix Holt, The Radical by George Eliot. This is a chunky one, and so I'm glad I finally started it. It is, I think, I'm not going to look it up, but I believe this was kind of written in the middle of her oeuvre, and I am enjoying it. I found the foreword or introduction, the prologue, mind-numbing, and I have to admit that the Victorian novel does usually start out with way too much description, and I almost thought I can't read this novel, but I did go through it pretty skimmingly until there was a hint of a narrative near the end of that prologue, and then got into chapter 1, and then I was hooked. It's set during the time of the 1832 Reform Act, and a not long lost son, but a son who's been away from the family for more than 15 years, comes back to take over the estate. And there's been litigation about this estate, and I'm still sorting out the details of all that. There's a 60-year-old woman who I'm really taken with her character, and George Eliot does a fabulous job of creating such deeply realized characters. And I'm really fascinated by his mother, whose name Mrs. Transome. I'm just easing my way into it. It's the kind of prose that you have to really pay attention. I don't want to read it late at night when I'm a bit sleepy. I need to be fresh in the morning, and I'm not sure when I'll finish it, hopefully this year, but it has got my attention. So that's what I've started. Oh, no, let me tell you about one. I said before that I didn't bail on anything, and I have not bailed on this book, but in my DNF tag version, I talked about the fact that I have created a on hold file folder on my Goodreads profile where I occasionally put books that I do not consider to be bails, but that this has ended up not to be the right time, and I'm going to come back to it later, maybe much later. This one has gone into the on hold folder, but not much later, like at the early next year. I think I'm going to come back to it, and that's The Sound Mirror by Heidi James. Quite a new release out of Ireland. And I read 40 pages. But I read it so episodically. I'm reading too many books, and some books just don't fit into that kind of reading style. I freely acknowledge that. This is one. And it's got 3 characters of different generations, and I assumed that they were a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter, and now picking it up so episodically, I'm actually not sure if they're even related. I've done some searching on the internet. I didn't want any spoilers, but I found out that we get the connection between the 3 main characters comes at the end of the novel, but I've lost the thread of it. So I'm just going to put it aside. It was holding my interest, and it got crowded out because I was reading a bunch of other stuff, and that sometimes happens. I will not forget about it. I will be coming back to it, and hopefully will end up enjoying it. But it's on the on-hold shelf. As for the coming week, my next exercise bike book is this one that is a reprint from earlier this year that I've always been curious about, and I think it might be a great bicycle exercise bike book. I think there's certain kinds of writing, certain kinds of books that lend themselves to being read on an exercise bike, and I think this is one. A little bit on the light side, and women's fiction from 1933. Business as Usual, co-authored by Jane Oliver and Anne Stafford. Look at that cover. It's a cover that hooked me. It's been on my shelf for a few months. It's about 2 working women, an epistolary novel, and the one Hilary is a Edinburgh girl. So is it completely Scottish? I'm not sure, but one protagonist is from Edinburgh, fresh out of university, determined to support herself by working in London. And I've screwed that up. Just because there's 2 authors, Sean, doesn't mean that there's 2 protagonists. Hilary is the sole protagonist as far as I can see, because I don't usually like to read the synopsis, but no, there's only one protagonist. And it is richly illustrated and, like I say, epistolary. I think it's going to be fun. I'm going to give it a try starting tomorrow morning. And the next non-exercise bike book that I finish, once that happens, I will finally start this gay Victorian era novel, Sins of the Cities of the Plain by Jack somebody or other. Jack Saul, 1881, and going to be a throbbingly good read. Here's hoping. So that's what's going on reading-wise in my life, and I hope that whatever's going on reading-wise in your life is throbbing as all get out. Thanks for watching.